right. Welcome back to the Bookly podcast. I think our next episode, if we do another episode, we should do it in person because I'm going to be in Alaska next week, which is going to be exciting. But I'm glad that...
book fast.
Yeah, we do have to pick a book fast. It would have been nice if this book had come out like 1 week later, even though we pushed it back already a full week, because then we could have done it in person. But... yeah. I really did want to do this book with you, mostly because I'm hoping that you have a lot to talk about in this book, because I have a little bit. So we'll see how far this goes. I did enjoy this book, but I don't think I enjoyed it as much as you, and so you're going to have to lead a lot here. But this week's book for the Bookly podcast, for anybody who's following along, is Pride and Prejudice. And I was actually really excited to read this book because... one, I've never seen the movie, any of the movies. I've never seen the BBC special. I've never seen anything. I didn't even know the story. I knew some of the characters. Like, I had heard the name Mr. Darcy before, and that was really it. So I didn't know anything going into this. I didn't even know, like, who ended up with who. I know, which is crazy. I feel like I've been living under a rock. It's a quote from a movie, like, where have you been living under? A stupid rock?
No.
I don't know what that's
That movie
from.
was always playing in our house.
I know.
I watched that movie so many times.
There was a good period of time where, like, you, Mom, Brenna, and Auntie Kendra watched that movie. Like, the BBC full-length, I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Special.
Like 9,
which, by the way,
hours.
how long is the BBC special?
I'd have to look it up. I want to say it's like 8 or 9 hours, though.
So it's basically the book. Because the audio book is, like... 10 hours, 11 hours. So it's like word for word the book. Like, is that essentially what the BBC special is?
Pretty much. I remember watching the movie many times, and then the first time I read the book, it was like I could read the book and see it in my head, and it was like everything was in the movie.
What about the Keira Knightley one?
The Keira Knightley is just like a normal hour and a half, 2 hour movie.
Well, yeah,
and that's actually
is it
that's
good?
why I didn't like it. So I despised it for the longest time because it wasn't word for word. Like, you missed out on things from the book. But I finally rewatched it like a year ago, and I actually really like it. I think I just was prejudiced against it for a while. No, I don't like Keira Knightley, so I think I kind of just hated on it for a while.
Even like Pirates of the Caribbean, Keira Knightley?
I liked her in Pirates, and then I never liked her since. I don't know why.
Honestly, I couldn't.
But I really like,
I couldn't tell you one other thing she was in other than Pride and Prejudice and Pirates. I don't know. Has she been in anything else? To me, she's just the lady from Pirates. But
Pirates, yeah. I think she is, but I don't think she... See, but now I'm like, was that Natalie Portman?
I know. I get the two of them really mixed up.
Yeah. I don't know. Anyway. But yeah, the short one's good, too.
Nice. Yeah, but I knew nothing. I know that's crazy. And then I listened to, before I read this book, I watched a lot of YouTube and I listened to a lot of podcasts in my free time. And I was listening to somebody that I really, really like rank classic books. Like, it was just like a list of classic literature, which I didn't agree with a lot of his list. He listed like Frankenstein as, he was like the S tier, A tier, B tier, C tier kind of thing, and he listed Frankenstein as like an A tier. I was like, really? Frankenstein? Like, that's one of the greats. Same with 1984. That was A tier. I was like, come on, dude, that's my favorite book. But as S tier, kind of like the cream of the crop, he put Pride and Prejudice up there. He said it was like amazing and all this kind of stuff, and he raved about it. And I really do like this individual. So I was excited to read this book, and also to kind of probably dig my head out of the sand and actually understand the story of Pride and Prejudice. And I enjoyed it. I will say that. Going into it, Olivia was like, "You're not going to like this book." I was like,
well, I mean, it's definitely like a love story. I mean, that's like all.
And it's not my normal genre. Again, I'm like really enjoying, I don't know, more serious-ish books.
Yeah, more meaty,
political theory, like political thriller-ish type books. Like, that's kind of what I've been enjoying. So definitely not kind of normally what I would say is my cup of tea, but I felt like there was still quite a bit of like I don't know how to put it, historical, political commentary in with this book as well, kind of like of the times. And that's the part that I really did enjoy. So very interested. This is your favorite book of all time, right? Am I wrong?
Well, I mean, it was growing up. I don't know that I could keep it at like the favorite, but it's in my top like 10. I've probably read this book like 15 times. Like,
really?
It's a very easy book for me
times?
to like listen to. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not that long.
It's not.
But yeah. Long. Yeah. I mean, Dad had like the leather bound like classics, you know, and I just, every time I kind of got like in a book rut, I would just pull it off the shelf and I'd read it again. And yeah, I've read it a lot. I've listened to the audio multiple times.
Have you listened to the audiobook with Rosamund Pike that narrates it?
I don't know. I don't look at narrators' names, and I should.
She's the actor in the Keira Knightley one that plays Jane.
Oh, okay.
And she narrates the whole thing. She's really good. That's the one I listened to, and it was really good. And for right now, anybody who's listening, or at least I don't know if it is right now, but when I was probably about a month ago when I was looking at making sure that I had all the books and I was checking out books and stuff, it was one of the free books on Audible. Like it was one of their, there was one of their like Audible redo, you know, kind of promoting Audible like classic, things. Yeah. So you could actually get this book for free, narrated by her. She has a very good voice, as you could imagine, because she plays Jane in the movie. So
yeah, I just checked, and that is the one that I listened to this time. So yeah, she was good.
Yeah, she's good. So not your favorite book. What is your favorite book of all time?
I can't pick up one. That's not. I can't do that.
Nothing? You can't like throw it out there?
No, I mean, there are books that I remember that like I still have in my head, you know, like the ones that I like continually think back on, and Pride and Prejudice is one of them. And
other ones are, what would you say? Like two or three.
Off the top of my head, Frankenstein is in there. These Is My Words. There's Charlotte Mason, Home Education, which is like a nonfiction book. I don't know. I'd have to think harder, but those are probably the ones that like jump out right away.
Okay. So what is it about Pride and Prejudice that you like so much? Is it the love story? Because I feel like, so after reading this book, I've done a lot of research on it, and there's a lot of reasons to like Pride and Prejudice, apparently. So there's like a bunch of different layers to it that I guess I was just way too dumb to pick up on as I was reading it. If you go on YouTube and you search Pride and Prejudice reviews, there's like a million videos on like what to know before reading Pride and Prejudice. And I feel like I watched a lot of those videos after reading Pride and Prejudice, and I feel like an idiot. It's like, man, I really should have watched these videos before, like it says in the title of the YouTube video, because I did not pick up on a lot of kind of, I don't know, the important stuff from Pride and Prejudice. To me, it was more of a story. But now reflecting back on it, there is a lot to unpack with this book. So there's, you know, kind of the surface level, just overall love story of, you know, I mean, there's multiple sisters within the book and kind of their relationships. It kind of paints relationships in a couple different stories, or in a couple different lights, through multiple sisters within the family, within the Bennet family. There's also a lot, and this I did pick up on, there's a lot of jokes, and it is kind of a funny book, you know. I think for its time, again, the book was written, I can't remember, 1812 or 13. Yeah, I mean, I was just looking at Frankenstein because I remembered it was like 5 years before Frankenstein. So a long time ago, because one of my biggest pet peeves, and I'm going to go off on a little rant here, I hate period piece stuff. I hate it. I don't like kind of the old English, I don't know, TV shows. What's the famous one?
Downton Abbey.
Yes, Downton Abbey. I cannot get into it. And then there's like,
That's
there's a million of
book.
them. I know. There's a million of them. There's like Poldark. There's the one with all the.
What? I love Poldark.
There's, as Aunt Tawny would say, Poldark and handsome. Um, and then there's, what's the one that everybody watches that's like sex and stuff?
Bridgerton.
Yeah, Bridgerton. There's a bunch of those or whatever. And I hate those because I hate the way that they talk, which I know is
really
dumb.
like the vocabulary.
Yes, it drives me nuts. To me, I loved the way East of Eden talked. That to me was like beautiful.
It's beautiful
because I understand it very, very easily, but it's definitely a plane above the way that I talk, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
it's the way
that I talk. It's more artistic way to talk, but it's not.
Well, it's like a modern artistic, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Like it's still the way that people talk today, or at least like still the way
the flow of conversation.
Yeah, and the way that like I guess millennials probably talk today. If you listen to if you watch any TikToks of like Gen Zers talking skirt eat.
Yeah, no.
Or whatever they say. Like that's not. But like the way that I talk personally, the way that I talk with my friends and things, it's like that, but just one plane above that. Does that make sense? Like it's not.
Yes.
It's not a stretch. Whereas these timepieces, I get that that's the way they talked in the 1800s, but it's like so much more of a stretch from the way that I talk that it kind of grates on my nerves. I know it shouldn't, but I'm uncultured swine, and that's okay because it just grates on my nerves. However, I do have an appreciation for things that were made from that time that talk that way. So like Frankenstein, I really liked. This honestly didn't grate on my nerves at all because I understand that, which maybe the movie shouldn't have either because it's made from the same time period. There is no logic to it. It's just the way that I feel, and I understand that I'm being irrational. I just don't like it.
Is it just like less authentic when it is like on a screen?
When it's like modern and I don't know. To me, it is. Whereas the book felt way more authentic.
Yes.
So I actually enjoyed it.
Yeah.
So there's, and that was my long way of saying, although it's not modern English, there are a lot of jokes in it, and it is funny. The Bennet father, whatever his name is,
I love him, is hilarious.
And there are other like quick quips and things, like Elizabeth is really funny and dry, and so like that was actually enjoyable throughout the book. And then the other thing is kind of the socio-political, whatever you want to call it, like norm commentary and satire and irony, I guess. I don't know. The YouTubers used a bunch of fancy words, and I'm just putting them all, smashing them all together, of the way that she writes about women in that time. And so there's, definitely different levels to the book. It's not just a love story. And it's kind of a lot of things wrapped around a love story. And so I want to know, is it the story that you really like? Is it a combination of all three? Is it like, do you really enjoy the more like satirical side of the book? What is it that really drew you into this book?
Well, when I was 12, probably the love story. For sure. I don't think that I would have understood the vocabulary if I had read the book without watching the movie as many times as I had. I think a lot of it went over my head. But now, like listening to it this time and as an adult, I think I actually very much enjoy the conversation and the language of the time period. I feel kind of dumb as well because I have to like stop and I'm like, wait, that was like so much deeper than like just like face value, like whatever it was that they said, especially when like Darcy and Elizabeth are like bantering back and forth, but yeah, I think now it's more, I appreciate the depth of the communication through the language that they have at the time. I'm not as much drawn to like the socio-political time period, although like I understand that has its place. It kind of reminds me of Little Women, but that I don't think that that's like the driving force for me enjoying the book. It is more just like, how can I think and communicate on a deeper, more educated, I don't know, plane,
I know nothing about Little Women.
I love a good love story too. You don't know anything about Little Women? Oh my gosh.
No.
Stop.
I know they just recently. You want to know? The only thing that I know is that they recently remade the movie and Timothée Chalamet's in it.
Timothée Chalamet. Yeah.
Shimmy yay.
Every time I say his name. It's actually a really good rendition of it. I really like it. And actually watching that rendition is what made me watch the Keira Knightley again, because it's very like colorful and artistically done and simplifies the story to make it enjoyable. Anyway, long story short, that's what made me rewatch it, because I was like, I actually enjoyed that version of Little Women. But yeah, that's not as much a driving force, the whole political thing. I love a good love story, but I'm also not like a big rom-com romance. I think Jane Austen is about as close as I ever get to reading love stories. That's not like really a driving factor for me in books. So
yeah, I definitely think so. This is the second romance. I mean, I guess there've been other books with like romantic interests in it. Like,
yeah,
weirdly enough, I feel like Dark Matter was almost a romance. And same with 1984. What's the Stephen King one about them going back
with
in
all
time?
the numbers. Yeah.
1970. I don't know, 1964.
Doesn't it have like 33 or something in it?
I don't know. I can't remember. It's whenever JFK.
The JFK one, right?
Yeah, the JFK one. That one was also much more of a love story than I thought it was going to be. So there have been books that I've read that were love stories, but probably the only two like classified romances that we've read on the podcast were this and The Bodyguard, which, I mean, could you pick two further books from each other? I don't think so. But this one was much more enjoyable to me than The Bodyguard. Although The Bodyguard was like a fun palate cleanser or whatever, and it was fun to listen to Olivia and Nicole talk about it. But this one definitely felt much deeper and had that more, I don't know, like more of a commentary to it that I really did enjoy. So we skipped right over the reading of the book, and I'm trying to do this more. So I'm just going to go ahead and read it. And then it's really, really short. So I think I'll be able to get through this one. Since its immediate success in 1813, we were close. Pride and Prejudice has remained one of the most popular novels in the English language. Jane Austen calls this brilliant work her own darling child, and its vivacious heroine, Elizabeth Bennet, as delightful a creature as ever appeared in print. The romantic clash between opinionated Elizabeth and her proud beau, Mr. Darcy, is a splendid performance of civilized sparring, and Jane Austen's radiant wit sparkles as her characters dance a delicate quadrille of flirtation and intrigue, making this book a superb comedy of manners of Regency England. Wow.
Very nice.
That had a lot of big words. But if you can't understand that, then don't pick the book because the book is harder. Just kidding. It helps when somebody else is reading it that can actually read. What was I going to say there? That like breaking that up really lost my train of thought. Do you know much about Jane Austen?
Sadly, no. I've read a lot of her books. I know that they made a movie, Becoming Jane. It's Anne Hathaway. I don't know how accurate it is, so I never watched it.
Is it like about?
Googled that.
Yeah, it's about Jane Austen, like for real.
I think so. It's called Becoming Jane. I'm pretty sure it is. She never got married, right?
No, she was proposed to one time. Accepted the proposal because it was a really rich guy that could have helped her and her family, because her and her family were fairly poor throughout everything. I think her dad was like a minister of sorts. So her dad was in the religious sphere of things and didn't make a whole lot of money. Yeah. And I think she had 12 siblings. Oh, or wow. She was one of 12.
Okay. That's a lot.
It was a lot. And I think she was the youngest or the second youngest. I can't remember. But I'm spitting off facts that could be significantly significantly far from the truth. I did do some research to try to figure all this out, but honestly, her life was almost as confusing as this book. So,
how do you know how old she was when she passed away?
I don't.
Sorry. Pop quiz.
I know, seriously. I do know that she wrote a lot of these books when she was younger. So I want to say, so her first book that she ever wrote was Sense and Sensibility.
Yes.
Which is crazy because another just banger, apparently.
I know. Like, that one is really good.
I've never read it, but I mean,
the movie's really good too.
Literally on a lot of all-time greatest book lists. And she wrote that when she was like 17 or 18, I think, and then got it published when she was in her 20s. And when she originally got Sense and Sensibility published, the author was a lady, I think was the name of the author. She just, because she couldn't publish underneath her name because nobody would listen to or read a book from or about or written from a woman. And so she published it just as a lady. And then all of her next books, which her second book was Pride and Prejudice. Then she wrote, I think, like 3 or 4 more. She has a total of 6 books. And 2 of them were published after she died, from manuscripts that she had written and stories that she had written before then. But 4 of them were published during her lifetime. And all of the books that were published under the author of Sense and Sensibility. So it was never published underneath her name, giving her credit because nobody would ever buy a book. Yeah. But it was crazy because she, I think for her first book, made like £100, which with the, and then in the brackets it says like what that is in 2023. It's like $4,000. Like, you know, like as that goes. And then I think, so the only book that she sold the rights to, the copyright, so she got like a flat amount for, was Pride and Prejudice. And she got like £100 for that one as well. And then, she never made like a whole lot of money off of her books. Granted, her dad was not also that rich. I think they said that her dad annually brought in like £200. So, I mean, £100 is like half of her dad's annual salary. But still, it's crazy to think how prominent of a book that is today, and like how much money has been made off of Pride and Prejudice. You know, there's multiple movies, TV shows. This book is, you know, still in print to this day. I mean, they're printing more and more copies all of the time. It is, you know, widely regarded as one of the greatest books of all time. Then you also have Sense and Sensibility, which has also had movies made after it. And then there's
Persuasion.
Persuasion. Jane is another one. That one's had movies made, or Emma. That's the one, not Jane. Emma has had movies made after it.
I'm so sorry.
Holy cow!
That's my alarm for.
Is she okay?
Type. Yeah, she's fine. Oh, okay. It's so loud. I'm so sorry. It is.
That like scared the bejesus out of me. No. But yeah, I mean, all of those have Emma, major like box office hits and movies and spinoffs and TV shows and all sorts of things. And she was poor throughout her whole life and made all of this stuff. It's kind of sad.
Yeah. And it, like the influence that it's had on just like, media and culture. I mean, like it's not the same as Shakespeare. I'm not going to say that it is, but like her stories have made it into like so many different other stories. Like it's just been like remakes of Pride and Prejudice or Emma over and over and over again, you know, just like you have Shakespeare stories where it's like you'll watch a movie and what's that Amanda Bynes movie, and they're like, oh yeah, that's Shakespeare. I'm like, what?
Yeah, there's like Pride and Prejudice zombies and, you know, all sorts of things.
I mean there's so many of them, but I mean, like, you can have a movie and it be about, I mean, what was Clueless is Emma. Like, it's the same story. Yeah. So I mean, her stories have definitely influenced anything, and I don't know if it's just the nature of the time period that stories took longer to spread and to like influence, that like you are just naturally gonna die before that, you know, you see the fruition of that.
But not really, because I was reading at one point the Prince of England, or one of the princes, or like a really high political official, said that he had all of her books and was a huge fan. And one of the
When?
dedications to one of her books, I want to say it was Persuasion, is actually dedicated to him upon request. So this prince or someone asked Jane Austen to make the dedication to him. And because he was such a big deal, she couldn't say no. So the dedication to the book is actually to him, even though she was like not a huge fan of this guy. And it was because he was a big fan of hers. And this was like while she was still alive. And then not only that, but while she was still alive, her books were translated into French without her knowing or without her receiving any sort of compensation to that, and published in France because of how well they were received in England. And it was during the time of the French Revolution, and there was not a whole lot of love for, as you could imagine, very wealthy aristocrat British families during the French Revolution, where they were basically chopping off their heads and fighting and killing anybody rich. However, the books were very well received even in France during this time. Like that's how much people actually loved her books. And this was all while she was alive. So I just looked it up while you were talking. She died at 41 due to a complication with illness that she didn't take super serious. But yeah,
it was like 5 years after Pride and Prejudice came out though, you know? So yeah, they spread really fast then.
Yeah, I want to say that I was reading most books during that time. I had an initial printing of about 500 copies, and she sold out of her initial launch of both Sense and Sensibility and Pride and Prejudice within the first year, which is a big deal for authors during the time.
Yeah.
So she wasn't like a scrub, and that's kind of sad, you know, like if she was that well known that a prince was requesting to be in her dedication, and she still wasn't even providing enough money to take care of her whole family. You know? So, but I definitely think that has to do a lot with the times. You know, a lot of what she writes about is kind of the I guess the way that society looks at women is next to nothing during that time period, and it's definitely evident throughout her life.
Yeah, that is just a good perspective to have, I think, when you read her books though.
Yeah, that she lived through that essentially. Minus the marriage, she never got the ring. But it is interesting though that she was engaged for one day to somebody.
Oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to throw my phone.
You're good.
It shouldn't be going off.
For anybody who's listening, Leanne has a child who needs to be monitored. I'll just put it like that. I don't know how much you want to put out there, but
it's fine. She has type 1 diabetes, but it should be going off my watch, and I don't know why it's not. And so it's like way louder than it normally is.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna
so it's important that it beeps when it does beep. It's
not the couch.
It's not a timer for cookies or anything.
No.
You know.
No, she's fine.
But yeah, so she was engaged for one day to somebody who was going to be able to was basically going to be able to take care of her. And it kind of reminds me of almost the engagement to the cousin. Yes. The one that has, basically the right to the house you know, like
when the dad dies.
When the dad dies, such a weird relationship. Modern kind of relationships and modern heirs, I don't understand how that's even a possibility, how that would happen. But essentially, because he has all daughters and no sons to inherit his home, he goes to the cousin. And at one point, the main character, Elizabeth, gets proposed to this cousin, and it would have been a marriage of convenience as well as kind of fortune, but decides that, and even her father, kind of the voice of reason, says, you know, I will basically be disappointed with you if you decide to marry him. Because you shouldn't marry anybody that you don't love. And that was very realistic to her own personal life when she had the opportunity to marry somebody that would have brought her family wealth and stability, but rather decided that she couldn't enter into a relationship that basically had no love and had no intellectual kind of
like balance.
Balance. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. So
yeah,
interesting that also happened in her own life.
That is interesting.
So what did you think of all of the different relationships within the story? Do you think that was purposefully done? Kind of the variety of, relationships, love stories, the way that the sisters, I guess, what was valued by each sister in their relationship? Do you feel like that was purposefully varied, or what did you think? Did I lose you?
Yeah, for like 2 seconds. I was hoping it would pop back on.
Are you good?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay, now we're like good. So you asked if it was purposeful for like all the different relationships and them being different?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that was on purpose. I think this time reading around, what stuck out a lot to me actually was how much observation she made of just human nature and human character and how much variance there can be. And so I think that all of her books, she does this very well, I think. And I think that's why people are drawn to all her different characters. But she does a really good job of creating characters with specific realistic character traits and flaws. And the different relationships kind of played out multiple different pairings, which I think was purposeful. I don't think that was accidental by any means. Some of them I relate to a lot more than others. Like I couldn't ever see myself marrying the cousin just out of comfortability. And I certainly would never be like a Lydia, just marrying Mr. Wickham for fun. Like, are you insane? But I do think that it is an interesting commentary on different character traits that people just naturally have. And when you allow them to dictate your decisions and judgments, whether consciously or unconsciously.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it was interesting. I think you kind of had a lot of different, like you said, a lot of different personalities. You kind of had more of like, obviously the impulsive, self-centered relationship of Lydia and Mr. Wickham that basically spirals out of control. And even until the very last page of the book is just essentially terrible. And then you had Jane and Mr. What was his name? Bingley, yes. And to me, their relationship were more of kind of the, I don't know, just like optimistic relationships, if that makes sense.
Golden
like,
retriever.
Yeah, kind of the golden retriever relationship. That to me is exactly what that was. It was the friend who just trusts, like Mr. Bingley, who just trusts Mr. Darcy no matter what, is just happy to be around people, has a positive attitude essentially always. And then same thing with Jane, just kind of bubbly and fun and
just very good-natured people.
And the relationship that works out well the whole time because of that, like how those kinds of people are naturally drawn together and how they, they do, how other people outside of the relationships like that maybe don't understand those relationships. I thought that was like a fun commentary. How Mr. Darcy just didn't understand that there are just people,
like simple natured
people who are okay not being challenged, not being pushed, but just want to enjoy each other. Does that make sense? And like he couldn't kind of wrap his mind around that completely. And then obviously there was the kind of the, I want to say challenging relationship, but I don't mean that in like it was hard. I mean it as in more of like they challenged each other and kind of that aspect of one improves the other person. And kind of like that battle back and forth. That's not a malicious battle, but it's a battle that, kind of brings them up together. And that was obviously Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy. And just like the different levels of relationships, I thought was very interesting.
So where would you put the dad and the mom?
I have no idea, because I thought the mom was absolutely unbearable. I don't know how anybody likes the mom. I don't know if you're supposed to hate the mom, but I hated the mom.
Really?
Yeah,
That's
did you not?
interesting to me. I mean, I don't hate her. I think I understand her a little bit.
Really?
Yeah. I don't think I'd make the same choices, and I don't think that, and I don't mean this pridefully. I don't think that I would be as anxiety ridden as she is with 5 daughters, that definitely ruled her life. But I think I understand it a little bit. I thought it was interesting that the dad is so supportive of his daughters marrying for love, and he marries the mom, and it's interesting to reflect on okay, then he must really love his wife, and how do you see that happening? How did they end up together? He really likes her then? He just really enjoys poking the bear?
Or he didn't marry out of love, and it's a desire for difference with his daughters. Does that make sense?
Maybe.
I don't know.
I just always the scene in the beginning where he's she's completely ridiculous, and she's you're vexing my poor nerves. You have no compassion on my nerves.
Yeah.
And he's oh, you're wrong. I actually love them. They're my dear friends.
No,
so
and I
funny.
get that. And there were parts at the beginning where I liked the mom. Or the parts that I couldn't stand the mother.
Yeah, when did that switch?
Basically any time that she completely overrules her opinions for the prospect of money and wealth. Does that make sense? So obviously not a huge fan of Mr. Wickham, but doesn't care because she thinks that he's going to provide stability and an opportunity for his daughter because he's in the military. And he ends up being just a complete scumbag even after marriage, and they basically ask and beg for money, more and more money from friends and family for the rest of their lives. So I don't understand that. And the dad is perfectly frank in saying that he thinks Mr. Wickham is a pile of garbage, and repeatedly makes jokes the entire time and says that Mr. Wickham's his favorite person in the world. You know what I mean? And you just know that he's just clowning
his
on him.
sarcasm is just
top notch. And I loved that because it was so funny, especially when he talks to Mr. Darcy. He's like, I have 3 great sons. My favorite, obviously, Mr. Wickham, and then you two. And it's just that is pretty awesome. But the mom doesn't, she's completely oblivious. She doesn't care at all. She only cares about the financial side of things. Same thing with Mr. Darcy. I was kind of hoping that everything would switch and the mom would kind of redeem herself as a character for me. When she hated Mr. Darcy, hated Mr. Darcy, hated Mr. Darcy, then she would have a come to Jesus moment with Elizabeth and actually ask her if she loved Mr. Darcy or why she wanted to be with Mr. Darcy, when in actuality, that conversation went from I hate Mr. Darcy to, hey, I'm going to marry this guy. And she immediately on a dime switches and says, you will be the richest person in the world. Think of all of the carriages and think of all of the jewels and think of all of the houses and the servants that you will have by marrying Mr. Darcy. And then instantly becomes I'm a huge fan of him. I love him so much. He's the nicest man. And the first thing that she thought about when she was told that Elizabeth was going to marry Mr. Darcy was the money. I hate that. It's what a terrible mom,
Yeah.
So
I can see that for sure.
I don't know. I mean, she was a funny character. As a character, I think she was funny, but she drove me nuts.
Yeah.
Her priorities were so backwards. And I get the desire to have her daughters married. And I also now, after reading or listening to all of these what to know before you read Pride and Prejudice videos that I wish I had watched before I read Pride and Prejudice. Kind of understand that it is supposed to be kind of an over-the-top satirical look at kind of the English, what would I call that? High society,
like
social structure, of combining families and the way that marriages work.
Yeah.
And so knowing that she's kind of supposed to be the over-the-top, like social climbing mother, I understand now why she was written that way, because I don't think she was supposed to be a loved character. I think she was supposed to be a funny character, but I think it was supposed to be written in a way in which you kind of really grasp the absurdity of marrying daughters off strictly for wealth.
Yeah. It was like a personified version of like that pressure
like,
and that necessity at the time.
It was the
here's what that person would look like if this thing that everyone is pressured to do in reality has to do was a person. How ridiculous that is.
If people said exactly what they were thinking when they were trying to marry their daughters off. Like that's what she was written to be. She was written to be the person who says the unspoken thing out loud.
Yes.
She was supposed to be the person that says like, oh, everybody's actually thinking if I could marry my daughter off to X, Y, and Z, then we're taken care of for the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it makes for a very unlovable character. Like a very unlovable character. So, I mean...
Mission accomplished, I suppose.
Yeah, I suppose. I mean, definitely mission accomplished. And then, obviously, the dad is kind of the complete opposite of that. I don't know. I don't really understand. I wonder who she drew inspiration from for her dad.
Well... when reading about like her life, her dad was always very supportive. And I think that he probably is similar. I'm trying to think, because I know in Emma, this is the case as well. The dad is also incredibly supportive and close to the daughter. And so I wonder if she did that for most. I mean, that's 2 out of 6. So that's not like great odds. But
what about Sense and Sensibility? Is there a dad in that one?
I can't remember.
Yeah, I'd be interested, because her dad was definitely supportive in her life from what I read. I know that he sent them off to school, which again was not something that was required to do for a lot of women. And he definitely allowed them to read. He, in fact, encouraged them to read, encouraged her writing in a time when women, often were encouraged not to write, that there was better uses of their time. Because she started writing short stories and plays, and would write performances and read her stories out loud for her family at a young age. I think they said that it really started at like age 14. She would start to write short stories and read them aloud to her family, and her dad definitely encouraged her throughout all of that. So there's definitely there's definitely an aspect of a supportive father, and she probably did draw on that quite a bit for her stories, if I had to guess.
Yeah, because if I think about like the commentary of the time, if she's trying to draw like, here's the story of daughters, and the mom is like the personified ridiculousness of the situation of daughters, then if she has a supportive dad, it might not be in her, like it might not be her desire to even paint fathers as anything other than supportive and wishing the system wasn't the same for them as well. But like no one's really in control of it, And so like that might be an accurate portrait for her of what she saw.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's reality, at all, but
yeah, I don't know. But who's your favorite character in the book then? So did you like the mom?
Well, no, I didn't necessarily like the mom. No, I think she's hilarious. But I have always loved Elizabeth. In fact, I don't know if you remember, for the longest time I tried to get people to call me Lizzie. No one in the family would do it. Yes, I did.
When was that?
I even changed my email to be Lizzie. Yeah, I did. From
When?
like in middle school, and then right into high school. Because I was like, we were homeschooled, reinvent myself. But mom was like, no. And she was like, I tried to get people to call me, what was it, Jules? And she was like, and no one will call me Jules, so I'm not going to call you, like, she's like, so we're not doing Lizzie. Like, we're not changing our names. And I was so annoyed because my middle name is Elizabeth, and no one ever pronounces my name correctly, and so I wanted to be Lizzie.
How do people pronounce your name?
Oh my gosh. I don't, lean, mostly. Like, that's what I get. I don't know.
Oh, that's weird.
Like 80% of the time. I don't know. I think they think I'm Asian or something. Anyway, no one pronounces my name right, but I tried to be called Lizzie. I've loved Lizzie. I think that I also really appreciate her, like, wit and carefreeness that I don't think that I've ever really embodied very well. Like, you know, I'm a more pessimistic Jane than I am a Lizzie. But I'd like to be a Lizzie, you know? And so I've always enjoyed her character, I think, the most, even though she also is incredibly frustrating because at times, I mean, she's just blinded by her own, you know, imperfections and character flaws as well. But aren't we all? So anyway, I think she's one of my favorites. And then it wouldn't be a good love story if I didn't also like Mr. Darcy.
Yeah.
So I do like Mr. Darcy and like the way that he, you know, is honorable, especially with his sister and people that he meets. So
Who would you say is most like me?
Mr. Bingley? No. Mr. Collins. JK. No. Bingley.
Who's Mr. Collins?
The cousin.
Oh, he's a loser. Thanks a lot.
No, Mr. Bingley. Although it's funny,
that's what
like
I feel
his
like
sister's like insufferable. So
his sister's the worst. But yeah, I mean,
so let's not read into that.
no, that's the character that I related to the most. Just kind of like whatever, everything's great.
Yeah,
everything's happy.
Yeah, look for the best in people and enjoy life and have the party and it's great.
It's fun.
Yeah.
No, I liked him a lot actually.
Yeah.
I wish that he had more of a plot in the story. I felt like he was mostly there to introduce characters. Unfortunately, because I thought he was fun.
Yeah, and I don't think that he's like, when I think of him and I think of Jane, I don't necessarily think that they're like simple-minded, you know. So I do wish that their characters had a little bit more involvement so we could figure out more about them, you know. Yeah. But there are these other characters that are just more center front and loud, you know.
I don't see them as like blissfully ignorant. I see them as just like happily who they are.
Yeah, content.
Yeah, definitely. Have you read a lot of other books that take place in this time period? And if so, what is this your favorite out of all of them?
Well, I was just looking up. The Bronte sisters are right after.
I think you cut out there for a sec. So we're just going to go ahead and give you... All right. One more time. Sorry, you cut out there. That was our first time cutting out. That's not bad.
Yeah. No, that's not bad at all. I was going to say the Bronte sisters are right after. They were born in like 1818. Okay. So I definitely prefer Jane Austen to the Bronte sisters, though.
What did the Bronte sisters write? That sounds super familiar.
It should. Jane Eyre and Wuthering Heights.
Wait, did you not like Jane Eyre as much as you like Pride and Prejudice? Because I feel like that's
read Jane Eyre.
That is kind of from what I've surmised on the internets, and from my wife, who's read every book that's ever been written. You're either in one camp or the other. With
the Bronte sisters or with Jane Austen and
with Pride and Prejudice actually with the Bronte sisters and with Jane Eyre Jane Eyre.
Jane Austen.
Jane Austen, whatever her name is.
So many names.
Jane Austen. I know, so many Janes. Jane Austen and the Bronte sisters, but specifically with Pride and Prejudice and Jane Eyre.
Yeah.
You've got one foot in one of them, and you're very adamant that one is better than the other.
Yeah. Well,
So.
I'm excited to read Jane Eyre then. I actually haven't read it.
Mm-hmm.
I read Wuthering Heights, which is the other sister.
Mm.
So there's the two. And it was, I should probably reread it, to be fair. I read it like senior year of high school, maybe it's sometime in college. And it was very dark for me at the time.
I think Jane Eyre is a little bit darker too. If I understand correctly, it's not as bubbly as Pride and Prejudice.
Yeah, and that was kind of hard for me when I read it at the time. I hadn't read anything that was like more gothic-y, like dark. Now that I've read Frankenstein, not that like that's it. That's all I've read that's really like gothic. I think that I might have a better appreciation at least for that style and like story. Does that make sense? I hadn't read anything that like made me appreciate it. I just was always like, why would I read something dark and scary? I don't like that. So yeah, I'm gonna read Jane Eyre this year, and then I should probably reread Wuthering Heights and give it another shot. But I definitely prefer Jane Austen, I would say, if I had to put my foot in a camp. Obviously, because I've read it, but
yeah, because I think Jane Eyre is Olivia's favorite book ever. If I'm thinking right, I think that's her favorite book ever, and she is much more a Jane Eyre over Pride and Prejudice side of things. But I know she really did enjoy Pride and Prejudice. I do know that she really likes this book, but
yeah,
I think she is of the other camp, as far as I know. But I think Jane Eyre is in September on the Bookly podcast, so I'm excited to read that one. I think so.
Yeah.
It's either July, October. No, it's not October. August.
It's coming up. I bought the book so I could read it. So.
Oh, so it's maybe closer than I thought.
It might be.
Yeah. But I think it's longer too.
It is kind of long.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, any last thoughts on there before we go into rankings about Pride and Prejudice? Anything that you caught this time around that you felt like, I don't know, caught your attention?
I think that the depth of characters might be deeper than I was aware of before. I think that at face value, she does a really good job of saying, like, you know, I don't know, one character is pride and one character is prejudice, or one person's, you know, whatever. I think that as I was reading this time around, like, they all kind of have a mixture of all of them. And so it's kind of interesting to analyze each of those characters, trying to figure out, like, you know, how they're exemplifying all those different traits. But yeah, I just enjoyed reading it again. It's like one of my favorites. So I would encourage you to watch the movie, though. It is also very good.
I'll watch the movie now. Definitely. I'll watch the movie.
Just watch the Keira Knightley one. Don't watch the 8-hour one.
Don't watch the BBC one. Okay. I'll watch the Keira Knightley one, and I'll let you know what I think. But I'm always... I'll leave this for my ranking. So what would you rank this book on a scale of 1 to 5 for importance and 1 to 5 for engaging?
Well, I'm going to say 5 and 5.
Yeah.
But that's because that's my rankings. 5, like, engaging. I've read this book like 12 to 15 times. I don't know. I've stopped counting. So it's got to be engaging. But I also think the banter, the satire, sarcasm, and everything makes it enjoyable and, like, quick, you know, paced.
Yeah.
If you can keep up with the language. So yeah, 5 for engaging and then 5 for importance, just because I think it has influenced so much writing and entertainment. And if it, you know, if you are interested in socio-political economics of different time periods, I think it paints probably a very accurate picture of what it was like in, you know, town, country folk, and, you know, the nuances that were there. So yeah, for importance, I think I'm going to give it a 5. I think that anybody who can paint important, weighty topics and also paint like criticisms and critiques into a fun story has a very special talent. And I think that that's very important. I think that you know, is very impressive. And then, like you said, kind of its influence that it's had over the years over basically all of culture for, you know, since 1813 is insane.
So obviously it's a very important book. I think back on other books that we've read for the podcast. To me, not quite as heavy-handed, but books like Animal Farm that are fun. Animal Farm is like a very fun book, but it also, takes a very serious topic and kind of creates a critique of that topic through a fun story. A farm with animals that are overthrowing farmers and create their own society and things like that. And it's goofy and it's over the top, but it really, really outlines and critiques a portion of that, of that history and what's going on in the world during that time. Pride and Prejudice is the exact same thing. And that to me is so impressive because of how impressed I am always of, George Orwell and other great writers who are able to take very weighty topics, like the significance of women in the 1800s, a very, controversial and heavy topic, and paint it into a story that is kind of bubbly, fun, and enjoyable. I think it's just, it's really, really hard for people to do that. It's hard for people to step outside of society, look at society, kind of pick apart the actual problems, come up with their own opinions, and like write that into something that's enjoyable. I was listening to a YouTuber, I believe yesterday, that was talking about Pride and Prejudice. And he was actually, he said, I thought that this was very accurate, that most people don't have their own opinions. And if you think you have your own opinions, more than likely you don't have your own opinions. More than likely you heard something from somebody else and you've picked up on that opinion. And most of your opinions are inherited either from family, from the people that you listen to, the books that you read. It's very rare that people truly build their own opinions out of perception. More likely it is that you build your opinions from what other people tell you.
That's a fun thought.
Yeah, but it's very accurate. I did the exercise in my head because I was like, all right, well, what do I believe and where did this come from? And a lot of it comes from, again, other people that I listen to, comes from the people around me. And there are
that aren't your own.
There are a few opinions I feel like in my life that I have gotten like truly organic from myself, but none as weighty as my opinion of an entire system of regularity. Again, that just goes to show how perceptive, how smart, and how brave Jane Austen was in her ability to kind of step outside of of that time period's culture and the norm of that culture and develop the opinion that this is absurd and then be able to communicate that with other people. So again, I thought that was really, really cool and also very much of a credit to her as the author. And, I really do agree with that YouTuber and kind of what he was talking about. So because of all that, I think it's just a brilliant book. And I do think that it is a 5 for importance. As far as for engaging for me, I'm going to give it a 3.5, which is a little bit rough.
It's okay. I braced myself for a 3.
Yeah. I was going to go 3, but I felt like 3 is just mean, but I couldn't quite give it a 4 because I wasn't always thinking I want to pick up this book. I want to pick up this book. When I was listening to it, it was fun. I wasn't zoning out, which is where I put 3s usually, but I didn't want to keep it took me a full week to read this book. There are books that I'll read in 2 days. You know what I mean? And so for me, sometimes that dictates a lot of the way that I look at books. And so it wasn't the most enjoyable book out there, but I understand why people like it, especially if you love, again, the Pride and Prejudices, the Emmas, the, Downton Abbeys, the Bridgertons. This is a book that would just slide right into your book and your entertainment genre. It would be a really fun book, and it's not overly complicated, but it can be if you want it to be. So I always think that that's always good.
Yeah, that's cool.
So
added.
Yeah, I think I would give it a 3.5 for sure.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah, but I do understand its importance, and I do appreciate what she was able to do. Mm-hmm. And I'm excited I'm glad I read it. There are books that I've read that I just wish I had never read, and this is definitely not one of them. This is one that I can honestly say I understand why it's a classic. I'm glad that I read it. It's just not my cup of tea.
Yeah, well, that makes me happy, and I can take that.
Yeah.
And run with it. So great.
Awesome. Well, next week's book for the podcast, if I can get it done, which is going to be a little bit of a stretch because I've checked this book out on Libby now 3 times, and nice. I've had to return it 3 times because I thought it was coming up sooner than it was, and I know that it's a long book, and then I just like re-upped my checking out on this book, but it's The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson, and it's a 25-hour long book, and so I'm like, oh boy, I have to crank through this book pretty quick. But from what I understand, it's a quick read, and it's very, very, it's one of those books that I feel like I'm going to want to keep reading constantly. Yeah. So I don't think
once you get in it, like hopefully get comfy in it and it'll go quick.
Yeah, it's just going to fly by. Plus I have a couple plane rides, to Alaska, and we've got all sorts of things driving to Utah, and I've got time. To listen to this book. So I do think I'm going to finish it. But yeah, that's next week's book. It's going to be The Final Empire, the first Mistborn series, or the first of the Mistborn series by Brandon Sanderson. And then the week after that, for those of you who are reading along with the podcast, I should probably know what this is off the top of my head. It's kind of sad that I don't.
In your defense, it just changed.
It did just change. The whole order changed because of flipping...
Jack Carr.
Yeah, Jack Carr pushing back his delivery date, dude. It's killing me. A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, which I'm actually excited for.
Yeah.
You don't sound like you love that book, but it is a classic, and I've been enjoying it.
It is a classic, and I'm glad I read it.
I've been enjoying classics recently, so I'm excited about that one. We have some fun ones coming up, but we'll have to do one while we're in Alaska.
Yeah, just pick a book and I can try and crank it out. I have to read my other book club book tomorrow so that I can have it done by Wednesday. So
nice. Which one's that?
Yeah. The Women.
Oh, nice.
Olivia read it like 4 months ago.
Yeah. That one's on the podcast for next month. I'm actually excited for that one.
Nice. Yeah, I'm really excited because of after reading First They Killed My Father, because it's about Vietnam.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, very exciting. Awesome. Well, anyway. Any last words or anything?
Nope, I don't think so.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming on the podcast, and thank you to everybody who's listening. And make sure that you leave a 5-star review if you are listening on anywhere where podcasts are. And if you are listening on YouTube, make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe to this channel, and let us know what books you'd like to have us read. Well, actually, I know. I have a whole list. I don't know why I said that. Read along with us. I've chosen the books already. I'm not switching them up. And let me know if you'd want to read a book with me, and you could be on the podcast. How about that? Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.